will be fruitful for the near future for young researcher, for some startups and the people who are interested in this kind of area. So please welcome Professor Fahad Takisales History on the stage. Sir, the stage is yours.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to express my thanks to Professor Nisit and Chiang Mai University ASEAN Economic Research Center for providing me this opportunity to be here today. Actually, this is the third time that I visit Chiang Mai University and Chiang Mai as well, and it is a pleasure to come here. And today and tomorrow, during these 2 days workshop, I would like to deliver my own experiences to you. My own experiences, first of all, as an author, and secondly, as an editor. And most recently, I'm spending majority of my time on editing journals, different journals. So I would like to share my opinion with you, and all these things that I'm sharing are my own experiences that I'm pleased to share with you. So in different countries, including in Thailand, publishing became important, as it is a factor to recognize the output of students or researchers or those who are in the academia. So, but how to measure, how to assess whether this publication is qualified or has some sort of quality or not? So since it is a qualitative matter, it is difficult to assess, but presently there are different indexes that help us to measure whether this journal that we publish there, or whether this paper that we are citing or we are reviewing or we are using in our research, is it high impact or does it have enough impact or not. So among these indexes, I think you heard about the Web of Science and the Scopus. So these are the two main indexes which are existing. So Web of Science is mainly American system. It's coming from the US. And Scopus is mainly European style, European system. So in some countries, Scopus is more popular. For example, when you go to Indonesia, so they are so much interested in Scopus publication. Scopus index is very popular. But in some other countries, Web of Science is more popular, like in China or in Thailand. I hear that it was Scopus, but gradually Web of Science and SSCI are becoming more popular. So Web of Science, as it is clear here, is the world's most trusted publisher independent global citation database that started by Dr. Garfield, who was the inventor of the first citation index. And presently, it is covering, Web of Science comprehensive platform, allows you to track ideas across disciplines and time from over 1.7 billion cited references, from over 159 million records. So this shows that how expanded is this network. And when we are looking at the different products of Web of Science, so Web of Science is a brand that belongs to a company, Clarivate Analytics. Clarivate Analytics owned. But these are the indexes which are, popular, and we have seen it frequently, or we see it frequently. First of all, it is SCIE, or Science Citation Index Expanded. Science Citation Index Expanded is covering 9,200 journals. 9,200 journals. Majority of the journals which are indexed by SCIE are more science-oriented journals. So, science-oriented. For example, engineering, chemistry, physics, basic science mainly. Or those who are more scientific. It means among humanities and social science. So this index is not so much popular and it is not used. The second one that we want to focus is Social Sciences Citation Index, or SSCI. SSCI cover only 3,400 journals. So only 3,400 journals are covering by SSCI, not only in economics, finance, but in 58 different disciplines of social science. And so this is about Social Sciences Citation Index, or SSCI. Thirdly is Arts and Humanities Citation Index, AHCI. This is also covering about 1,800 journals, which is mainly related to arts and humanities. Next one is ESCI, Emerging Sources Citation Index. This is covering 7,800 journals. So, although it's mentioned that SSCI is important, however, some universities, some countries are more focusing on Web of Science. In the field of social science, when you are looking for an index which is covering in the Web of Science, SSCI and ESCI, this one, SSCI, and ESCI are covering. ESCI journals are easier to be published, and SSCI is more difficult. SSCI is top. ESCI, it means it is emerging, and in future, this journal will be SSCI. So publishing in ESCI is easier. But presently, it became very difficult for a journal which is ESCI to become SSCI. It became very difficult. So just a few days ago, I had a meeting with a publisher who asked me to become an editor of a journal, and a journal that they proposed me was ESCI. So I asked them that, how is it difficult to move from ESCI for a journal, to move from ESCI to SSCI? The answer is that according to the new regulations of new rules that published by Web of Science, in order to move from ESCI to SSCI, the impact factor of the journal needs to be higher than the median of impact factors of all journals which are SSCI in that discipline. For example, presently, if the median of impact factor is 2, it means for a journal, in order to move from ESCI to SSCI, the impact factor should be higher than 2. Impact factor of 2 is difficult, it's very difficult. It's not easy. So it means that although publishing in ESCI journals is easier, and although it mentioned that ESCI in future will be SSCI, but this future, it doesn't mean next month, 2 months, 3 months. It depends on the performance of that journal. So when you are submitting to a journal, you need to consider this matter. But when we are talking about Web of Science, these indexes are not just limited to journals. Books are also indexed. Conference proceedings are also indexed. So Web of Science has two specific indexes for books and conferences. For books, it's called Book Citation Index, or BKCI, and for conference proceedings, it's called Conference Proceedings Citation Index, or CPCI. It means that presently, every day, daily, throughout the world, there are hundreds of conferences on different topics. So when you are looking for a conference to submit your paper, it is very important to submit a paper to a conference that the proceedings are indexed. Then it will be counted as your output, as a referenceable or citable output. The same thing is existing for book. So formerly, books didn't have any index. So because of that, people who are in the academia, they didn't show interest to publish in books or publish a book chapter. Majority of researchers or those who are in the academia are just looking for journal publication. But book is also very important because book has more general audience. Journal is more specific. For example, if I'm looking for a topic very specific, I look for a journal of it, journal paper. But if I want to have more general information, I read a book. And book's language is more understandable, comprehensible for the general public. But journal is more academic, more professional. So it means having book publication is also very important. But more important is that publish in those books that have index. So then it means that at the same time that we have book chapter publication, at the same time we have this index. So as mentioned, we are focusing more on SSCI, or Social Sciences Citation Index, that cover 3,400 journals across 58 social sciences disciplines, as well as 3,500 world's leading scientific and technical journals. So presently there are almost 10 million records over there. So editors of social science, editors of SSCI, they are looking at 24 different indicators. 24 different indicators. Citation is one of those indicators. For example, how many days does it take to give the first answer? How many days does it take to give the second answer? How many days does it take to publish? Quality of publication, publisher, and so on. So there are 24 different indicators that the editors of Web of Science use in order to. And I think you know this, but I just want to mention that if you want to know which journal is SSCI, which journal is ESCI, you can go to this website, or in the Google you can type Web of Science journals. So this search engine will come, and then you can type here name of journal. It will mention here that if this journal has Web of Science index, if it is indexed by Web of Science, which category of Web of Science. For example, I mentioned here energy policy, and it mentioned that yes, this journal has Web of Science and it is SSCI. So then I can find out that it is SSCI index. Or if it is mentioned, it is ESCI. It means it is emergent. It is easier to publish there. So this is first thing. Secondly, if you log in through your university account, for example, here I logged in using my account. My name came here. Then I can have access to the list of journals. If you want to have access to list of journals which are SSCI, list of journals which is ESCI or SCIE, you can log in using your university. I think Chiang Mai University, I think, also has access to, you have access to. So using your university or institutional account, you can access to the list. Then you can find out whether this journal is indexed or not. Secondly, Scopus. What is Scopus? So Scopus, as I have mentioned, is European system and European index. So Scopus belongs to Elsevier. So Elsevier is one of the world's largest publishers. It is based in Europe, Netherlands. And it covered 36,000 almost titles. So as we see, Scopus is much larger. So when I talked about SSCI was almost 3,000. Scopus is 30,000, more than 10 times. So what does it mean? It means it is easier to publish in a Scopus journal. Same as, likewise, same as Web of Science, Scopus is also covering not only journals, but also book series and trade journals. So it means books are also indexed. For example, in the beginning, it mentioned about, so here, these are some of the books that I edited. So these books, these are indexed. For example, this book, this first book and second book, these are Web of Science. What does it mean? It means each chapter of this book has a specific DOI, identification number, and each chapter has a Web of Science index. Or this book, which published by Routledge, this is a Scopus. Each chapter is a Scopus. This is also a Scopus. So it means this is important. Yeah. And in order to find out whether this journal is a Scopus or not, so there are different ways to look at it. First of all, you can look at the scopus.com, or I usually use this website, SCI Mago Journal Rank. So usually I go to this website, and over there you can find out. If you go to SCI Mago, this is SCI Mago. When you go to SCI Mago and then put name of journal, then this analysis comes. This analysis comes there. So what does it mean? This means that, for example, this journal is in the field of energy, management, monitoring, policy, and life. As you see here, this journal, since 1999, it was always green. Green means that as for the ranking, it is in the first quantile, Q1. First quantile, it means top 25%. So it means this journal is very difficult to publish there. As for the ranking, this journal is in the top quantile, top 25% journal. So if it be, yellow, orange, red. So yellow means Q2. It means the second quantile. Orange means third quantile. Red means Q4. So red is much easier. It is very easy to publish in red. So if you want to start to publish, so my suggestion is that it's better you don't submit to SSCI journals. SSCI journal is very difficult. Maybe you can publish initially from SSCI, but publishing in SSCI journals, it's a matter of time. The review process is very long, maybe 1 year. So, for example, I published one paper, I submitted one paper to one SSCI journal when I was a student. And then, when I graduated, I became assistant professor, it accepted. 3 years. It took 3 years. But not all SSCI journals take this much long time. I also published in some SSCI journal in 1 month, 2 months, I got the answer. But by average, SSCI journals review process is longer. So my suggestion is that if you want to publish, first of all, it's better that you choose a Scopus journals. So although usually all those journals which are SSCI, all of them are also a Scopus at the same time. So what I mean is that look for those journals which are only a Scopus. And then look for the ranking of it, that it is in which quantile. Q1 means very difficult. So as you see, this journal, since beginning, it is always Q, top, very top. Q2 is also difficult. Q3 easier. Q4, not very easy. It doesn't mean that when you submit it will be accepted, but it will increase your chance. And frankly speaking, this is also a suggestion. When you want to, if you submit initially to very top journals and you always get rejection, so it doesn't give you good feeling and maybe it kills the motivation. Submitting to a little lower level journals, getting acceptance or getting a revision request, it will give motivation to you to continue doing your work with more interest. So this is also very important. So SciMago is providing lots of information. So when you go to SciMago website that belong to Scopus and Elsevier and you type name of a journal, you can see lots of information that this journal, is it growing or it is going down? The impact factor of it or the SJR of it, the points of it, ranking of it, is it improving or it is? So it means you can get some information about this journal, about the performance of it in the last year, when it started and so on. The second information that you can receive from SciMago is ranking of the journal in that field, in that discipline. For example, here is the information that we receive from SciMago on energy policy. On energy policy. Yes. Okay. On energy policy. Then, as we see here, it's mentioned that energy policy is in 2 disciplines: energy and management monitoring. Then if you click on each of them, you will see a ranking. This is ranking of journals in that discipline, in that field. So for example, the first one, which is energy, it mentioned that the #1 journal is Nature. Nature review of material. That it belongs to UK, SJR of it is 34, H index of it is 61. Do you know what does H index means? So H index means that H index 61, it means 63 papers that published in this journal cited more than 61 times. So for example, for energy policy, H index is 178. It means 78 papers that published in energy policy in the past cited more than 178 times. So this is the definition of H index. For example, this is that energy policy that I mentioned. It is in the top 10 journals. So as I mentioned, quantiles are coming from here, Q1Q. For example, in the field of energy, there are 100 energy-related journals, maybe more. This is an example. 100 journals which are Scopus. So all journals which are here, minimum they have Scopus. Maybe they also have SSCI, but minimum they have Scopus because they are listed in this website. This website belongs to Scopus. So it means if in this list there are 100 journals, it means from ranking of 1 to 25, they are green. From 25 or from 26 to 50, yellow. 51 to 75, orange. 76, 100, red. So initially it is better to look for the journals in that red parts. It means going down in this list. Imagine you are interested, you are coming from different backgrounds. So maybe, for example, your field is finance, environment, energy, trade, monetary policy, economics, and so on. You can go to SCIMAGO or SCIMAGO website and put the discipline, not name of journal. You can search for the ranking of journals in that discipline. Then you look for example, environment. And then you see the list of the journals. Then you go down, you see red. Then you will see several journals that it is better to target in that journals initially. So this is about the journal. Secondly, as I have mentioned, you can also go to Scopus website. If you go to scopus.com, from scopus.com, first of all, you need to use your institutional email. Then you can access to different information. Information about the journal, information about the authors, and so on. For example, this is my page in Scopus. You go to Scopus, you want to know that, for example, this author, how many papers he published? Does he have any publication, Scopus? Then you go there and you put name of the author. Then it will bring here that, for example, what is the affiliation of this author, how many times. For example, you see here, this shows the publication. And you see H index. Each person also has a H index. Each author also has H index. For example, H index 10, it means 10 papers that I published, cited more than 10 times. And each author has different H indexes. For example, this is H index in Scopus. If I go to, do I have internet here?
Yes.
Okay, so this, another popular way to look at the H index is through Google Scholar. So, but why? You see H index here, for example, my H index here is 21, but when I look at Scopus, my H index was 10. The reason is that Google Scholar is collecting all citations. For example, when I publish a book, or when I publish a working paper, and then that citation is also counted here. But the citation which is in the Scopus is only counting Scopus publications. So it means Web of Science has its own H index for each author. Scopus has its own. Google Scholar is wider, it's larger. So usually the H index or the citation of each author in Google Scholar is larger than Scopus. So this is about the H index and citation. Okay. Next, let me talk about so this was about the selection, about the ranking of the journals, and next about the selection of the journal. The most important point before submission to a journal is that we submit our paper to a right journal, that the scope of it is completely related to the scope of our paper. So many times, I by myself also, many times I submitted papers to wrong journals, and I waited 3 months, 4 months, 2 months, 5 months. Then after that, editor sent me a rejection, mentioned that this paper is out of scope. So in order to save your time, in order to avoid this wasting time, for example, when you go to that SC IMAGO or SciMago, when you see the ranking of the journal, and then you find a journal which is, the impact factor of it is reasonable, it is not high, it is not very low, and the name of it is related to your research, name of journal. But from name of journal, we cannot completely find out or understand that it is related, our paper is related. We need to go to the journal websites. Search in the Google website of the journal. For example, again, energy policy. I search in Google energy policy, then it directs me to the energy policy website that I can get different information here. Then here I can see the scope of journal. You see, here is the scope of journal report. It mentioned that energy policy is an international peer-reviewed journal addressing the policy implications of energy supply. So, several points mentioned here. It means it is addressing policy implications. It means my paper needs to be more policy-oriented. If my paper is theoretical, mathematics, or all of them econometrics and so on, it is not suitable for this journal. And more on the energy supply. If my paper is talking more on demand of energy, then this journal is not suitable. Better I don't submit. And use from their economic, social planning and environmental aspects, paper may cover global, regional, national, or even local. Here mentioned global, regional, national, or even local. So it means this journal is more interested in international, global, or even, it doesn't mention that if your study is a case. For example, energy policy case study of energy or a hydropower company in Thailand is one case. It doesn't mention that if that paper be submitted to here, it will be rejected. But not so much interesting for the readers of this journal. Readers of this journal are more interested to look at the studies or papers which are more general and more possible to be expanded to other countries. If just one case, for example, if I do a study, efficiency of a hydropower plant in Laos. So this is an international journal. Do you think that a study, I mean for readers who are in the UK, in the US, and they are paying for these journals, very expensive, is it important for them to know about the situation of a hydropower plant in Laos? Is it important for them? Not so much important. Maybe it is important, but not that much. So it means selection of the journal is very important, and by these few sentences, a scope of journal, objective of journal is clearly mentioned here. And as again here it's repeated that policy prescriptions are required to be supported by rigorous analysis. It means that the papers which are going to be accepted in this journal finally needs to provide some policy prescriptions, policy recommendations. So for this journal, as it is coming from the name of it and as it is coming from the scope of it, policy is very important. But there are other journals as well that they are focusing on theory or focusing on econometrics and empirical part. So it means before. So first of all, let's review. First of all, it mentioned that SSCI Scopus. Initially, it is better to target Scopus. Then, selection of the journal, looking at the ranking of it in SciMago. Better to start from the easier one. Better to start from Q4, then Q3, then Q2, then Q1. And next, when you have seen bunch of journals, enter to their website, read the scope of that journal before before submitting to their journal. Before we go to a short coffee break, so I want to give a suggestion, especially for students, researchers who don't have publication yet, but interested to publish. First of all, it is very important to read papers, journal papers. Secondly, after you start to read papers in your field, then start to review as a peer reviewer. First of all, when you want to look for the paper, not searching in the Google, but searching in databases. So I by myself, whenever I want to look for a paper related to my specialty, I go to this website, Science Direct. So I usually search in this website, Science. So Science Direct belongs to Elsevier. All papers that you search and you find them here are published in Scopus Index journals, minimum. So when I say Scopus, it means that maybe they have SSCI, maybe they have SCIE, but minimum they have Scopus. And when I go here, I search. For example, I'm interested in energy finance or green finance. Green finance. Then I search the keywords. Different papers come. And for example, the first one is my paper. Then you go here and again, if you search using your institutional email address account, you can download the full paper. But if you are at home or if you don't use your institutional. Usually if you connect using the Wi-Fi of university, it automatically, is it same here? Okay. It automatically connect, and you can get instead of get access, here you see PDF. It mentioned PDF, that you can download it, you can save it. Or at university you can save in your laptop, in your mobile phone, then when you go home you can also read. So first of all, reading papers related to that. Second important thing is to review it. Gradually start to review the paper. So when we are talking about review means peer review. So when you submit a paper to a journal, the journal office or the editor remove the names, submit the paper to anonymous reviewers. So this process is called peer review. So you can act as a peer reviewer for different journals. So you can log in, you can sign up to this website, HubLoans. HubLoans is a directory, is a website belongs to Web of Science. HubLoans belong to Web of Science, and when you sign up there, you can show your interest as a peer reviewer. You see different journals there. You can go to the page of that journal, and by clicking over there, the option is appearing, and you show your interest to that journal, that I'm interested to peer review your papers. Then the editor will see different requests. First, you make a profile for yourself. I'm a student, I'm a researcher, I'm a faculty at Chiang Mai University. This is my profile and so on. Gradually, editors will send papers to you. And the good thing of HubLoans is that in the past, when peer reviewers do peer review, no one could recognize them because the peer review process is anonymous, no name. But here you can register your peer review. It means when you do a peer review for a journal, for example, a journal send you a peer review, a paper to peer review, then you do peer review, and then when that peer review finish, the journal will send you email. Dear doctor, dear professor, thank you very much for peer reviewing. Then you forward this email to HubLoans, to an email address. It mentioned reviews@hubloans.com. It mentioned the instruction, everything mentioned in the website. Then that review will be added to your profile. That, for example, Professor A, Dr. B, or Mr. or Mrs. C reviewed for this journal. It will increase your, academic value as well, because it will be added to your CV. It will be added to your CV. So this recognized peer review process has several benefits. First of all, we will learn. Now I'm peer reviewing also. So I mentioned I'm now authoring, editing, but peer review process is a valuable process. So many Nobel Prize winners, still they continue to peer review. Still they continue. So one of my friends, he is a distinguished professor. He told me that he submitted a paper to a prestigious journal, and then he received a peer review from a peer reviewer or from the editor. And then peer reviewer found out his email address and sent him an email. It mentioned that I read your paper, it was very interesting. These are my comments for improvement. Then he found out that he got Nobel Prize. He was a Nobel Prize winner, that peer reviewer in economics. So it means, it doesn't mean that peer review process is it's a cheap work. It is a valuable work, And by this HubLoans, you can keep the records of your peer review. This is a way that I'm doing. I'm by myself. For example, in 2019, I had 34 reviews. This is my profile at HubLoans. And this year, just 5, because now we are still in February. So, peer review, HubLoans provide lots of information. Because if you have account at HubLoans, you will have access to all Web of Science products, because Publon is a family, is a part of this family. For example, in your Publon's website, your publications will be also mentioned, not only your review. For example, this is my page. It mentioned this author has 29 Web of Science publications. Or, for example, how many times each of his publications cited. Or let's go to Publon together. So you can register and then log in, but as an example, I want to show you the So it provides lots of information. First of all, the Web of Science Researcher ID. Web of Science, this is the ID which recognizes this author in Web of Science. How many publications he has, how many times cited, how many reviews he had, how many editorial works he has done. And then other information which is, for example, this person is reviewing for these journals. So when you have peer review, it will be automatically added here. That, for example, this person 20 times reviewed for energy policy, or 2 times for economic modeling and so on. So in order to be peer reviewer, you no need to have PhD, you no need to have master's degree. So even presently, that I'm editing different journals, I'm editor of some journals, I submit papers to my students for peer reviewing. For example, I have a master's student or even undergraduate student, but a student that I know she or he has some sort of information and knowledge that which is related to that paper, which is first of all good for that paper, for the author of that paper, because my student will read, will spend the time and will give comment. Secondly, it is good for the student, because the student will also learn. So presently, I have, as I mentioned, I assign many of my students to do peer review, and they are not PhD students, some of them master students or even undergraduate students. So I suggest that you start to review, okay? So I think it is enough for now, and then we will continue after a break, okay? Thank you.
So we have 15-minute breaks, and I try to grab, from the PowerPoint that if the speaker allow, and just add and throw into our live group as soon as possible. So enjoy the coffee break outside, and the restroom is right over there, and please come back after 15 and enjoy. Just make yourself comfortable, don't need to be serious. Thank you.
Good.จะเข้าไหน แต่ขวาทำเราดีสิได้สไลด์
มันไม่ได้กำลังทำให้ครับผมเมื่อกี้ที่เอาเข้าไลน์กลุ่มครับเข้าไลน์ครับนี่เป็นไลน์กลุ่มของอาชีพ
เข้าไปเลยแล้วจะได้สไลด์เลย
ได้ตรงกับใคร
เอ้ยจัดอันนี้ใช่ไหมครับที่ปริ้นออกมาใช่ไหมครับ
อาจารย์เดี๋ยวพรุ่งนี้ดูก่อนนะคะเพราะว่าจะชุมแผนที่วันแรกว่าต้องไปหรือเปล่าไม่สัมภาษณ์เองที่รู้อาจารย์
อันนี้ยังไงครับ
ที่
ที่เข้าเป็นนิสิตครับ
ได้ที่
เอา
รับไลน์ไปแท็กไปแล้ว
โอ้คนนั้นเลยใช่ไหมโอ้เอาเข้ามาแล้ว
ไปแล้วเดี๋ยวมันจะมีไปสิ
โซนได้เลยนะ
หลงพ่อเป็นว่ามีไทยด้วยวะแก้ตัวงานคุณแต่ว่าได้แจกได้ก็เลยสำหรับคนสองถ้าเป็นคือเป็นตัวเอาเอ็มจีแบบก็จะมีเซ็งใจใจ
ที่หนึ่งที่สองที่
คือถ้าเป็นของสายจะได้แจก2แจก1แต่ถ้าเป็นของด้านไหนเนี่ยถ้าแจก
ก็คิวสามคิวสี่
3 4ถ้าเป็นสายถ้าเป็นของมาเรียบร้อยแล้ว
อันนี้ผมว่าเป็น
ก็คือถ้าเป็นของแต่ชิ้นไม่ใช่แต่ละคนแต่เอาด้านไหนแต่ว่าอาจจะต้องแบบช่วยแบบสำคัญสุดตัวเอง
เป็นของเอ็กซ์เลนของเราเนี่ย
ใช่แต่ว่านี้จะเป็น excellent ใหม่นะคะก็จะเป็นใช้ผู้จัดการที่อยู่ของสวมาที่เราสัญญากับเขาแค่9 เปเปอร์แต่ว่า9 เปเปอร์เนี่ยมันมีของแต่ไม่ใช่7 เปเปอร์
เก็บอะไรเลยเนี่ย
ใช่ติดต่อ
เราต้องปา
ว่า
ว่าได้แบบจะได้ซัพพอร์ตเพื่อน
ประสบ
ไม่ได้พวกเขาเป็นประชาชนถ้าเขาไม่ได้ชอบไม่เป็นสิ่งที่ดี
ไอ้จัดได้
เขาไม่ได้ตัดส่ง
ได้
ไม่เขียนว่า
ส่ง
พอชอบ
ส่งเลยได้การ
Thank you sir ดูแล
เรื่องมันเข้าไปลง
เดี๋ยวแป๊บนึงใหม่แล้ว
เดี๋ยวเย็บชื่อ
วันนี้สัก1 เปเปอร์เอาไปซีเดี๋ยว
Hello, how are you?
Which one I should
For what?
I'll show you my file
Presented first.
For that yesterday I was not there
COVID two main speakers
the one who is a banana pizza
also ADVI is under drafting so we have conversation
just can't
ADVI said
he's the
but they
easy
are all head
have performance
and the workshop the professor from Lucky will come what are today's goals we can minimize the line sorry because please just code
Close it.
just wait for the Yeah, I love
But how do we work? Because
So what's that?
I just
Our
maybe
brain
was upload
it, but I want to know if something changed or still.
She can promise, but she will talk to you.
But is that what you propose to?
But my hopes. No, but because of a lot of people. Actually, the most that's one is Ajahn. The most.
But that is not all.
And but I propose for Ajahn Ganika, so for one, like start of teaching is really hard, and then like this many topics. ขอบคุณนะคะที่น่ารักค่ะ But most of Chinese students mention that
This is your brain. Yes, okay. That's true. It's like my branch or senior, I mean, it's earlier than you. One year more in your branch. That branch is 80% is they have background of economics. But your branch is 80% not
don't
have
have
background.
so
Yeah.
I didn't know that. It's
Only 5 students background. I mean, still economy
yeah,
or
like
finance.
bachelor in economics.
Another no. Like
Yeah, I
engineer,
can tell like
engineer,
less than 10.
English, electronic, engineer, computer science. Just two subjects.
No, actually they comment all.
For this semester, just research STEM, research methodology, someone suggest to
Just one but actually Chinese comment all subjects. 4 subjects. And if you can guess, I think they mention about mathematics because they don't have a background, so they want like faculty to provide like extra cost for that mathematics.
That's not the problem. But the problem is why this is the problem. Last year we talked about the same problem. But
You said yourself.
yeah, I mean that if they're ready to study after the that's not ready. Just
Because right now the international program itself, we have only less than 10 for pure economic. I can tell like 5 or 6 people. And it's kind of like, okay, we just come to people.
the friend yeah, you must be a human.
Requirement.
It must be a human. Then you can talk. No matter how you disabled or not, and you got an English code, then health, then study.
I found one from Cal. He's a new student, like bachelor in Chinese student, bachelor in economics, and master degree start first year on the second semester.
With you,
You know the guy,
very
for
tall.
I think your friend
So not my friend.
have a
Or one. His girlfriend always sit with him.
Another one. That one is our classmates. But this one is the new one. Just study first semester on our second semester.
Oh, that means the new grades only 3 students.
We're not in the kind.
Interesting. And this year they will work. I mean, June, the semester starts June and works because the virus. We delayed our, Chinese university delayed the ceremony, not ceremony, if the goes delay 2 months, or maybe 2 months, and some university cannot start.
For international, I'm not sure
Non-Chinese government. In our class, my brain have about 27. You do.
for Thai. I'm just small.
Your brain
Settle in my Thai student. From out of 26. 27. Thai student. Thai student 7. Oh, sorry. Chinese 18 and Myanmar and Cambodian. So none of Chinese.
I'm going to finish it. Yeah.
You just feel like
The
just
five only five
Chinese.
international. That's very expensive.
It's a hard time for them. Like even he dropped 701 and I asked him like, how about this semester? Semester he said, if I drop for 100 times I cannot get it, something like that.
Also,
I said, my friends, my junior said, get away from I told him, I cannot get away, I have no shot and it's just so that's why she moved to teach on master for the first time at my age, that's my age, at my first time he taught she was something. I will ask you guys, and I just know like this is the first time she moved to master
how about your grade?
I mean, because of I got very bad for me, I need to be
Average is B. But don't A, but B minus.
we have just put 1 to 8 things, and like most of them C. The most of it C.
Cái mà hai cái đó sẽ có đi xem cái sách gì nữa xem thành phố vẫn đang bị kìm về quỷ
That only.
That's why someone suggested to me, we didn't use the website from mid-Chinese.
but everyone since we build the boutique everyone know how much more I can get don't have to tell us because we know how much person we can do. Yeah. Because sometimes how we create is so very different. Someone gets 70, someone gets 7.
That's how. She is unfortunate one because she's like try for midterm and she not get a low score. She try for the Jakarta. She try like okay I want to find more than I know and she give her. But it's big. No matter she need to re-enroll. Yeah.
In these others.
No, it's a compulsory course, I think. It's level 1.
Compulsory.
Yeah, you need to.
Because they don't allow to get
Yes.
MRC.
It's average. Average. I said it's average.
Average is okay for me, just for 7 weeks. And just for only people attention create a little bit
What comment?
this year compulsory is research and biology or economy just only two and three are biology.
So you have to study again in your third semester.
Yes, for another one more day I can review this semester, but I don't want to review now because for this semester I just have only two years. That's why I can study.
You can enroll one more.
Oh, one more.
This is example. And the whole time credit is 15. So you can enroll one. Then this semester I enroll this is something. So it's full 15.
Yeah, that's why I decided to review in first semester for my group. I need to study with you.
Lucky 30 video and this semester don't have more students. You and more students.
They study 7 or this semester.
Yeah, only 6. 200我签了。So also 200 was increased. Maybe someday.
This semester they are school for my group. 现在我们because some of our classmates drop out.
If the class member the class size is 10 or something better, then 3 or 4. Because when you study QA, not QA, is in the computer lab environment. There is no very close to other space.
I prefer that room is great. Oh, you don't?
It's too close.
But it's just one side is good because another side is say
I prefer the third floor because you're always in the third floor. 23001.
Attention workers.
oh
It's better.
Second
Because
one.
the screen
the problem is about the when it's night it's not in the front here.
yeah, because I here. Then maybe
I like the small side, but I don't like the structure of the room. It's too close. You know, I mean, it's too close.
I can study computer in that class and then sit nearby me.
I think
Here is projector. I sit here, others sit here. Others always active. Because we only have 4 students.
sponsorship. Yeah,
No, I think the deadline is the end of April. So I have to write 5 pages proposal to the have you got any supervisor
at first,
but we had to have a supervisor to look your proposal is valuable and doable. Then this proposal have to be your application or your final thesis. Must be, cannot change.
for me, I think I can change because it's doesn't
Yeah, because you don't have any requirement of application.
have one strong, not specific content. I just want one strong.
What is the Q2?
It's great here too. For three. Is
If just find the Q2 very close to Q3 is easy, but spend a lot of money on there's some application to pay like a paper journalists associated with some companies, do I have to attend conference to make sure I can publish?
Yeah, some require you have to present. It's a lot of time. I'm very old now. I'm getting old now.
Everyone get you.
It's 3 years. Maybe I think I can find work. I jump first.
Firstly, study PhD, just study, you don't have to work. You're gonna die.
Yeah, sure. I agree with you.
And protect your head. Every Chinese PhD, before they have half an hour, now they think there's a popular,
It's used to now.
a lot of a lot of pressure. The whole purpose of the one start travel and then when the first year do the compulsory exam pass, then you're gonna be an easy candidate. If not, you're backsliding. Or you can find some assistant job. Everyone assistant. Just sit in the center.
So welcome back, and before we start to have the second session, I would ask a right of you to have a photo taken from this workshop to put on the Facebook, and also the website of our faculty. Would you mind please step out and stay in front of me? Okay, with the speaker. I will ask you. I think time. Yeah. How about this? All right. That's it. Sorry, please. All right, everyone. Please. Okay, one more.
Thank you very much.
So, welcome back, and also we have the opportunity to have the Dean of the Law Faculty also attend. So he really like to publish his paper, that's why he like to attend this session. So welcome, Dean of the Law Faculty. So please continue with the second sessions, and Professor Wang Habi also provide more some relaxed presentation, and I'm pretty sure that the document that I provided in the live group also available for you just now. So now stage is open.
Thank you very much. So welcome back. So today, in this part, in this section, I would like to talk about some cases based on my own experience. So in the previous session, I explained about how to select a journal, what are the criteria that we need to consider for selection of the right journal for your paper and for submission of your paper. And then, most important thing is to how to write a paper, because I can select a journal, but if I don't have a paper, so what should I do? So initially, most important thing is to produce a good research and a good paper, write a good paper to be suitable for the journal. So it means this is one step before selection of the journal, which is the most important thing. So in writing a paper and before writing the paper, in doing a research, because paper is output of a research. It means first I should do a research, and then result of it will be a paper to be publishable in a journal, or be presented in a conference, or be published in a book as a book chapter. The most important thing is to look for a topic to be interesting, because when a topic comes to my mind, so maybe hundreds of people, thousands of people before myself, they also thought about that topic. Maybe it is not new. So whenever you want to do a research, some keywords come to your mind. Then we need to search among the published papers in the directory, different directory. For example, Science Direct is one of the directories that I suggest. So some keywords come to your mind. Green finance, sustainable development goals. So these are three keywords: green, finance, SDG. Then I search in the directory and I read, or at least I read the abstract of the papers that come in that search. So maybe the question that came to your mind already answered by not one author, but by many authors. So it is better that you forget that research question, or it is better that you add something else. Because presently, there are thousands, millions of papers that explain different things. So it is very important to have a unique idea. And so let me close this door. So in another word, it is very important to do something to contribute to the literature. So first thing, which is very important, is selection of a topic to do a research on it. Then when depending on the nature of the research, so maybe you want to do a descriptive work. So not all works, not all papers need to be econometrics, not all papers need to be theoretical and mathematics. So in this session, I'm going to bring examples, 3 different examples. First group is, I will show a paper which is completely descriptive. Secondly, it's a paper which is completely theoretical, mathematics. And thirdly, it's a paper which is empirical, came out of econometrics work. So this is one paper. This is empirical work. You see, the topic selection of title is very important. Title should be as much, from my point of view, as much as possible short. So many people, they try to look for very long titles, using this method, using that method. But from my point of view, the title should be very, short, as much as possible short, not very long, and unique. Selection of title is very important. You see, energy and food security. It means this paper is talking about energy security and food security. But this is very general. It shouldn't be very general. It means readers, by looking at the title, should get some idea that what is the scope of this paper. It means this paper is looking at the linkages through price volatility. It means what is the impact of energy price fluctuations on food price fluctuations. So this is what comes to my mind from this. And presently that I'm editing journals, most important part of a paper from my point of view is introduction. I start by reading introduction, and in many cases, if introduction does not convince me, I reject the paper. I don't read the other parts. So, because if introduction is not attractive, I don't waste my time. Because every day I should read many papers. So if I see that this introduction is poor, quality of writing is very low, I don't read other parts of the paper and I reject it. So what points we need to consider in writing introduction? Introduction is very important. Most important thing is motivation of doing this research. It should be a reason behind doing any research. So motivation of doing this research. Secondly, objective. What are the objectives of doing this research? Thirdly, research questions. So when I'm explaining, when I mention that the research questions are important, it doesn't mean that you mention very clearly, these are the research questions. So it means when the reader or the editor read the introduction, he should understand the question of this research. Fourthly, a brief review of literature. Some papers have a separate literature review part. It means section 2 will be literature review, but some papers, if you don't want to have separate literature review, brief literature review should come in the introduction. And 5, what is the contribution of your paper to the literature? It means, first I mentioned that this is the motivation, objective, research question, review of the literature, and 5, what I'm going to add to the literature. It means, for example, again in this topic, food, energy security, these papers, these authors said this, they found this, but they didn't consider this aspect. So in this research, I'm going to look at this aspect because it neglected or earlier authors didn't pay attention to this matter. So contribution of the paper to the literature should be clearly mentioned. And the editor, because majority of the editors will read introduction and majority of the desk reject. Desk reject means that when you submit a paper to a journal, many editors before sending the paper to peer reviewer, they reject. So desk reject, we usually look at the structure of the paper, abstract, sections, is it clear, and reading introduction. So desk reject is mainly in the earlier stages. And if this introduction is not good, desk reject usually happens. And it means very fast, even before sending the paper to the peer reviewer. So these are the informations that you need to write in the introduction. Another important point is that each of the sections of your paper need to have some share in your paper. It means if your paper is 15 pages, for example, introduction shouldn't be 5 pages. Because 5 pages you are just introducing yourself and then concluding goodbye. So it means 2 pages, maximum 3 pages. So it depends on how many pages is your work. If your paper is a letters means short, it means 2,500 words. Then introduction should be much smaller, 1 page for the introduction. And not too much small or short, not too much short, not too much long. And these things need to be covered in the introduction. Secondly, as I have mentioned, some papers have a literature review, a specific section for the literature review, but some papers does not have. And in literature review is in the introduction. So for example, this paper, it doesn't have a specific section for literature review. And in the second part, we talked about this topic more. It means briefly, I explained about the topic in introduction, and then I put one section for this issue. It means energy, impact of it on food and so on. Because when I want to bring some figures and some tables, I shouldn't put in introduction. Introduction shouldn't have. There is no rule for that. But this is, the practice, the normal practice of papers. So when I want to bring some figures, some tables, usually it shouldn't come in the introduction. In section 2, in section 3, that I'm talking more about this topic, I need to bring the figures or tables that make this issue or defining this issue and make it more clear for the authors, for the readers. And section 3. Section 3 is usually, in this example, this is an empirical paper. It means I use econometrics models. So it is more a model, talking about the model. So even if you are using econometrics, this econometrics need to be backed by a theoretical model. This is very important. I'm talking about high impact journals. So usually editors of high impact journal, when they are looking at the econometrics model, for example, you are assessing impact of consumption, saving, and some other factors on household income. Assessing the impact. These are the regressors, and the dependent variable is GDP per capita. Then you bring the data, for example, the household level data of Chiang Mai. The editor will ask you that why you selected these variables as regressor or as independent variable. Why you didn't select other variables. It means it should be a reason for selection of each of your regressors. It should be a reason behind selection of each of the independent variables. What is the reason? Reason is theory. Economics textbook. For example, you should be able to explain that because of consumption theory, because of this saving theory, because of this matter theoretically. These explanations should come from textbook. We included this matter. So in another word, it needs to be a reason. For example, you see, we developed a model. It comes from a production function. Production is a function of labor, capital, energy. And then this firm is following profit maximization and then getting first order condition. It means this model, which is the econometrics model, is coming from that production function. Production function is economic theory. Then this is a reason. Behind each of these variables that I have in my empirical model, it should be a reason. Because reviewers will ask, why you are including agricultural land? Why you are including oil price? What is the impact of oil price on food? But by that production function, I clearly explained that. This is the reason, that is the reason. So it should be a reason behind selection of each of your variables in your empirical model. And then we will move to the empirical part. So this is an important point. Even for empirical papers need to be backed by a theoretical framework. That theoretical framework is the backbone of your study. the backbone, is a ratio, it's a logic of your study, which is very important. And then, in the empirical part, the points that we need to consider is explanation about data. Very clearly, you need to mention that. How did you collect this data? For example, data is a household level data. I collected by myself, or I got from this database very clearly. Or if it is a macro level data, I got this data from Bank of Thailand, Ministry of Finance of Thailand, this very clearly. And if it is a time series analysis, you need to explain why you selected this period. For example, you mentioned from 2000 until 2018. So always put yourself in the position of a peer reviewer. Peer reviewer will ask, why from 2000 until 2018? Why not 1995? So it should be a reason. For example, you should explain that from 2000 it was a new policy in Thai government and they changed the policy. So because of that, before that in year 2000 it was a structural change. So this is the reason that we limited our analysis to this period, and that during this period it was no more a structural change or a structural reform. So it means it should be a reason behind selection of the data for the time series analysis. This paper, as I have mentioned, it is an empirical work, and for empirical works which are quantitative and if they are time series analysis, it is important to have this table of descriptive statistical variable, which is very easy, mean, maximum, minimum, standard deviation of the variable need to be provided. Then before running because many junior researchers, they just start to do a regression without any preliminary studies or required tests for time series analysis. So if you are doing time series analysis, it means unit root test, co-integration test, and so on. These are very important that because it is not so much related, so sufficient tests on time series data need to be provided, and the results need to be clear here and need to be stated. Otherwise, it will be asked. And then next is the empirical model. For example, for this research, we have done a vector error correction model because of the existence of co-integration, that I don't want to go deep in it. And finally, section 4, as I have mentioned, is empirical analysis and interpretation of the results. Again, I have seen many papers that just running a regression, putting a table of the results. So what? It means each of those signs, each of those coefficients need to be interpreted. That yes, this is the impact of consumption on GDP per capita. And it changed in the recent year because of this, because of that, because of this policy of the Thai government and so on. So clear interpretation and connecting your empirical results, your interpretation to reality. It means you as the author, you have full information about Thai economy. And you are connecting that these results is connecting to this policy that government takes. So that when the editor or reviewer read your paper, he will understand that you are fully involved in this matter. You didn't just get some data, running a regression, writing a paper. You know that economic problems, and then you are looking for a solution. This is very important to connect your interpretation of results to the reality which is existing. And section 5, conclusion and policy implication or policy recommendation. Conclusion is clear, you are concluding the results. Another problem that I see in many papers is that in conclusion, they are just copying some parts of introduction to the conclusion that this is this, because they will understand, they will assume that, okay, conclusion, I need to explain a little bit about this research, and I explained earlier in introduction. So why I write another paragraph, I just copy it. So this is forbidden. So it means even if you want to explain again about that part, it needs to be in another language. It needs to be in another language in order to avoid it. And another important thing is that presently majority of the journals are valuing policy recommendations. So for example, for myself, for all paper, all journals, all books that I'm editing, I always ask authors that name of last section should be conclusion and policy recommendation. Conclusion and policy implication. It means that, okay, you assess the impact of consumption, saving, this and that on GDP per capita of Chiang Mai. But what is the recommendation that you have? What is the recommendation that you have in order to increase the GDP per capita of Chiang Mai? So it means you need some recommendations need to come out of your research. So some researchers provide some recommendations, but it is not related to this research. So policy recommendations need to come clearly and exactly from the empirical or theoretical studies that you have done. And it is very important. Better to put the recommendation with bullet points. Throughout the paper, it is better to avoid using bullet points. It means using bullet point, it means it's like a PowerPoint presentation. So throughout the paper, better not using bullet point style writing. But in the conclusion, in the policy recommendation, it is good because it should be very clear. And when we are doing a research, I mean, most recently, this type of research are more valuable to have some implications. So it means from your conclusion and policy implication from the last section, the last part, you can write a policy brief. Policy brief is a type of paper which is 700, 800 words. It is useful for government officials in a very clear, very easy language. You explained this research. No need to use complicated expressions, words in the conclusion and policy recommendation. So this is another point. And finally, as I have mentioned, each paper, each journal has its own guideline. So when you are preparing the paper, before submission, it is important to follow that journal guideline. So for one journal, the word count shouldn't be more than 7,000 words. One journal, it is only 2,000 words, 2,500 words. So exactly following that journal. Another point which is very important is level of English, writing English. So paper needs to be proofread by a native before submission. So although in some cases it is a little bit costly, but it is required. It is required. And one important point that usually most, editors or reviewers, they comment is the level of language. You can ask your friends, if you have a native friend, or if you have enough budget, asking professional companies to do the English proofreading and copy editing. Copy editing means preparing according to the guideline. Another point that I usually pay attention to it is figures and tables. So one point that it is important in my desk rejection decision is figure and table. Usually when I see figures or copy, it has very bad impression if it is copy. Copy, it means it is image. It means I found a figure in a paper and just copy paste it in my paper. So then I will assume that maybe this author copied even some other parts of his paper. So even if you want to use a figure from other papers, not only mentioning their source, but accessing to the data. Because, for example, you see a figure in a paper, and then the source of it mentioned. You go to that source, get the data, and then plot the figure by yourself, and then mentioning the source very clearly. Not just mention, for example, source IMF. But IMF is not a clear source of IMF. Which part of IMF you got this data? For example, International Monetary Funds, for example, IFS, International Financial Statistics 2019. Clear. And another point is that figures need to be self-explanatory. It means when someone sees this figure, even without looking at rest of your paper, should get the point. For example, if you use any abbreviations in the figure, clearly need to be mentioned here. Or for example, here I mentioned Iowa soybean price. So what is Iowa soybean price? So what price of soybean? So clearly mentioned here that when someone see this figure, get the point of this figure. Not, it doesn't need to look at other parts. Same thing is existing for the tables. Same thing for the tables. You see, tables also need to be produced by the author. If you have an abbreviation here, CD, it should be mentioned in the note that CD means cross-sectional dependence. So these, maybe you assume that these are not so much important, but it's very important from the editorial aspect, because the editor will assume, will consider you as a professional writer, that these points, you consider these points, and it is very important. So this is one example from empirical. This is an example which is empirical paper. Another paper is pure theoretical. This is completely theoretical. So when I'm talking about theoretical, it means this paper does not have econometrics analysis, data, no data used in this paper. And it is, I mean, if you are interested in mathematics, if you are interested in economic theory, so this type of publications, this type of journals are also welcoming that submissions, that saying introduction, in the introduction, those points that I have mentioned, motivation, objective, research question, review of literature, contribution of this paper to the literature need to be clearly mentioned in the introduction. And as I have mentioned, this is a theory, this is a theoretical, it means it is a mathematical board, but finally, ultimately, although it is a theoretical board, but it needs to have those recommendations that I have mentioned. Another paper, that this paper is also a theoretical paper, and it is letters. So when I say letters, so some journals are publishing letters. Letters means 2,000 or maximum 2,500 words. In my idea, in the future, and gradually, majority of the publications will shift to more letters. Why? Because we have lack of time. We don't have so much interest to read long papers, and we don't want to read stories. We just want to get the points. So letters are becoming more popular. For example, journals such as economic letters or in the finance research letters that I'm associate editor of it. So these are becoming more popular, although I think, first time that I published in letters, in finance research letter, so I assume it is easier, 2,000 words, 2,500 words, but it is more difficult because you need to do a research and you need to explain it in a shorter framework that is more difficult but more valuable. For example, when you are looking at science-oriented journals or medicine, or for example, science like Nature or Science, or these journals, all of them are short, 2,000. Or for example, for medical science, some of them 1,000 words, because medical doctors, they don't have time. So they want to read very fast and short. So these kinds of publications, journals are becoming more popular letters. And again, although it is letter, but same structure is existing here, but we need to make it much smaller. You see, this is the introduction of it. This is the introduction. Justice. Because the whole paper is just 6 pages and 2,500 words. And so introduction, which is explaining about it, and section 2, defining the issue, and 3 is the model. As this paper, it is a theoretical paper, and final part, conclusion. That this conclusion is also providing policy recommendation. So for the case of letters, references should be minimal. Usually it's better that we don't use more than 10 references. And in the letters, and in the long version papers, it means for those papers which are 7,000 words or 8,000 words, better not using more than 30 references. Average 30 references. Some papers are citing many papers, that is also not so much suitable. But, so let me also bring another example of empirical papers that, as you see, the point that I usually pay attention and I follow in writing my paper, selection of titles should be as much as possible short, precise, right to the point. The impact of monetary and tax policy on income inequality. No need I mention using data of these, a model from these, and 3 lines for the title. So as much as possible, short titles. And attractive, and as much as possible attractive. So let me also mention a point regarding the special issue. As you see here, it's mentioned that this paper is a special issue article of World Economy. So World Economy, it's a good journal. It is a CCI journal, and it is Q1. Usually publishing in this level journals is very difficult, but there is a way that make it easier to be published, which is a special issue. What does it mean, a special issue? So journals have normal or general issues. If a journal is quarterly, it means each quarter, spring, summer, autumn, winter, it will publish 1 issue. So, but in some cases, the editor-in-chief give this right of having some special issue, it means more than that normal or general issue, to a guest editor. For example, I'm a guest editor, I give a proposal that I would like to edit 1 special issue on inequality. Then I give this proposal to the journal, to the editor-in-chief, and editor-in-chief approve this matter. Then the guest editor will handle the papers. So usually publishing in a special issues is easier. The value of it is the same. because you are publishing in that journal, you are publishing in World Economy, so regardless of general issue or a special issue. So when you are targeting one journal, so I mentioned that using that criteria for journal selection, then you go to the web page of that journal. Then it's better that before you submit, check if that journal has a special issue. Then you see a special issue for inequality, and your paper is also on inequality. So it is very good chance, and it will increase your chance to have publication in that journal. So when you select the journal, first of all, before making submission, general submission, first check if that journal is providing any special issue. But special issues are very specific on one topic. So you need to check whether your paper is completely related to that special issue or not. And so up to now I mentioned two examples. One was this World Economy. This World Economy is an empirical study, but as I have mentioned, even empirical studies need to be backed by a theory, by a theoretical work. Not very complicated, but it is needed. That is the reason. And also the example of energy policy, this was also an empirical study. The finance research letter papers that I mentioned, it was a theoretical work. Economic modeling, this was also theoretical, but the third category is more descriptive papers. For example, in some fields of social science and humanities, law, political science, management, even economics, political economics. So quantitative works, theoretical works are not so much popular, and papers are more descriptive or qualitative studies. So there are many journals that welcome such kind of studies as well. So it doesn't mean that when you want to publish, you only need to do it. But my suggestion is that if you enrich your knowledge and your experience in econometrics, because econometrics is a tool, and it will help you to have more publication. In qualitative studies, you should have very unique idea. Very unique idea. In my opinion, it is more difficult. So let me show you one example of of qualitative studies. So this is in this work published in China and World Economy. China and World Economy, it is a CCI journal. It belongs to CAS, China Academy of Social Science. So in China, it is very prestigious journal. So this is pure like a book, So it means it's no econometrics, no quantitative work, just explain. But it was very interesting topic for China. You see, causes and remedies of Japan's long-lasting recessions, lessons for China. So for CAS, that institution, which is a public institution, governmental entities, it is very interesting to learn or publish a paper in the journal of it that explain that what are the reasons behind the Japan's long-lasting recessions. So although this study didn't come from an econometric analysis, but it is a study that provides lots of good policy recommendations to China. And so this is very important, that when you are selecting, when you want to submit a qualitative studies, a descriptive studies, first of all, submitting to a journal that has this scope. For example, if I submit this paper to economic modeling, it will be rejected in one day. Because this is not model, it doesn't provide any model or quantitative words or theoretical words. But China and world economy is publishing these kinds of studies, and it is interesting. For example, if you look at Thai economy and providing some lessons to China or something related to China and Thai relationship, economic or political relationship, this journal is looking for it, because this journal belongs to a governmental entity and it is in charge. This is very important when you want to look for a journal. So understand that what is the background of that journal. This journal belongs to an institution. This journal belongs to an association which is promoting a subject. And if your subject is related to, if your paper is related to that subject, so it means you will have higher chance. Or for example, the first paper that I published, I was a student, I was a PhD student, in the first paper I published in 2013. So the first paper published in OPEC and world economy. In that paper, what I found out is that OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Country, so it has effective role in global oil market. And then I submitted that paper to OPEC journal. So OPEC liked it because my result is supporting the mission of that organization. But if I find out that OPEC is a monopoly, it is increasing the prices, it is bad for the global economic growth, so it is clear that it will be rejected. So this is very important because each journal is belonging to an association or institution or university or organization and so on. And we need to pay attention to this matter, that our findings, our recommendations, whether is in line with the policies and the strategies. It doesn't mean that we do a research that people like it, that institution like it. But we are researchers. We are fair completely. But our research will have some result, positive or negative. And for us, publication is very important. So it is important to look for a right journal that's not only the readers of it, but also that organization like our result. So as I have mentioned, this is descriptive work that it is explaining about this matter. And about the number of figures and tables, usually, sometimes when I review or edit papers, I see some papers have lots of figures, tables. We should avoid it. You should avoid to use 7, 10 figures in one paper. So it should be normal. It depends on the paper and it depends on the publication. Usually in book chapters, we have more figures and tables. But in journal, we should minimize using figures and tables. Minimize. Having figures and tables related one, it is good. It will help to make the understanding of our work easier, but not too many figures and tables. That is also important. So another study, this is also another study. So let me also give you a suggestion. So among journals that you are submitting your papers, some journals have publishing fee, because those are open access journals. So open access means everyone can have access to it. Otherwise, if you don't use your institutional account, you need to buy that paper, and in some cases it is very expensive. But open access papers means that it is open, everyone, even if you don't use your institutional account, you can download that paper. So open access papers or open access journals will have more readers and maybe more citations because more people can read. So open access journals are usually have publishing fee. Why? Because the journal is not earning anything from selling the paper, because paper is open to the public. So in beginning, I need to receive some fee from you as the author, and I publish your paper. In some cases, not in all cases, in some cases publishing in those journals that have publishing fee is easier, some cases. So I suggest that, for example, it depends on your budget. For example, this is one journal, this is SSCI, impact factor of it is more than 2, and it is very distinguished journal, but publishing fee of it is about 1,500 Swiss franc. It means $1,500. If you are rich, these are easier, not easy, but easier. For example, if I submit this paper to two journals, for example, this journal and economic modeling. Economic modeling impact factor is lower than energies, but probability or chance of publishing at energies is higher, because energy is a monthly journal, every month publish many paper. Economic modeling is quarterly, every quarter. Economic modeling is not open access. You need to pay only 100 or 150 US dollar as a submission fee. Energies is a open access, but you need to pay about $1,500. But it doesn't mean that if you are rich, you will publish. So first paper need to be accepted, and then after acceptance, the journal will ask you, you need to pay this, and then after you pay, it will be open access. So some publishers are only providing open access services. For example, MDPI journals, all of them are open access, and it is not cheap. Minimum, I think, starting from 1,000 francs, Swiss franc, and maximum maybe 1,500 or 2,000 for each paper. But the chance of publishing is a little bit higher. In this level, in this journal, although the impact factor is very high. Okay, so how many minutes do I have? Professor, is it? How many minutes do I have?
I think that we have 5 minutes to be Q&A, maybe open change for.
Okay. So then after that, maybe in the afternoon session or anytime, I want to present one study, because I explain about journal selection, how to write a paper, but the most important thing is a study, is a research, that in doing a research, what factors we need to consider. So today and tomorrow, I will present two studies that, this one, today I will present, this is coming from a study that I have done for AREA, Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. It's now under peer review of a journal. It hasn't published yet. But by presenting this, as it is also related topic, it is also related to Thailand, to ASEAN, so we can get some points, some hints that for doing a research, that as a result of it, we will have a paper, what points we need to consider. So maybe after Q&A or in the afternoon, I will present this paper. So shall we, Professor, have the questions now?
Yes.
Questions?
Yes.
Okay. So I will be happy to answer your questions. Please ask. I'm here for this purpose, to answer your questions.
So what is the issue in energy economics that you think is worth investing time to research for implementation?
So thank you very much. So energy economy. So there are some topics which are interesting. For example, energy security. For the energy security, majority of the studies up to now are more qualitative. talking about the energy security or just war. So few quantitative works and few studies that connect energy security to economic theory has been done. So if students are interested, researchers are interested, so I think any energy security studies that have quantitative works are welcome. And in the field of energy finance, finance is also an important topic, energy finance. For example, in the finance research letters, we have a specific section for energy finance. And actually, I'm handling energy finance. If you have a submission to a finance research letter and it is related to energy finance, they will send me or to two others editors. So energy finance is also an interesting topic. Energy finance is very wide topic. So starting from stock market, derivatives, for example, crude oil and other energies in the stock market, commodities and so on, to how to finance energy projects, and most recently, how to finance renewable and green projects. So these are also, again, because of lack of data, not many works we see in this area. For the stock market and financial market, there are many studies because data is available, data is daily, so lots of econometrics work has been done. But for renewable and green finance, not many. So these are the topics that which are interesting for the.
So it's lots of questions.
So let me ask a question. So what is your experience? So you are, I think you are a student. So are you more master student or undergraduate?
For master student president?
Master.
Yes, the whole master.
So is it a requirement to publish here as in order to graduate? Yes.
Yes, we do require.
You should publish in order to get your degree.
We have different conditions. As in one presentation in the conference or one publication.
I see.
Requirement.
But any journal,
Yeah.
not index.
Yeah. Not like specific in some journals.
I
or
see.
Some index.
But I think it is very good that even from now you target. For example, let me show you this paper that published in World Economy. She was my undergraduate student, and actually this paper was her because in Japan, I don't know in Thailand, in Japan undergraduate students also need to write dissertation thesis. Here is also required.
Yes, like we call baby thesis.
Okay, so this is her undergraduate thesis that we completed. So she, was my undergraduate student. She didn't know econometrics, but she had a good idea. So this idea was her topic. So I had this class because I'm teaching a course how to do research in Japan. And so I teach econometrics also in that class. Econometrics, not very advanced one, which is required. And ultimately it published. And this publication also helped her a lot. She's now working at JP Morgan. So it was important for her to find a good job. So another paper that I didn't brought here, but with my undergraduate student, he published. And he is now working at PwC. So I can mention several of these examples with undergraduate students. So it means that even at undergraduate, you can publish with help of your supervisor, professors, because you have good idea, you see the different issues from your point of view, and professor, supervisor can teach you the method, tools, and then together it is published.
So they also have some students from China. I think that also some of them are good in writing. I think that probably the possibility that also good. and some of scholars from the Faculty of Humanities. Yes.
Very good. So, shall I know about your experiences, publication, and so on?
I published a paper in the Scopus database once in the first quartile, and it's about language processing,
Very
much more about language and psychology.
perfect. Very good. So we also have your PhD student, yeah. Okay. So is it required to publish for PhD for getting your degree?
Yes, we have to publish at least two papers.
Any journal,
In the international journal.
not a Scopus required.
Yes, in the Scopus.
I think Scopus is a safe choice.
Okay.
When you go through the two things.
Good.
ISI is better.
Very good.
Dr. Haron is my main advisor.
Very good.
And my question, yeah, as well. And my question is, in case of to publish for the PhD graduation, the strategy in your case is all the timing
Yes.
is so it's more priority than the paper. Is it?
Yes. Yes. So about the PhD, so let me give one point. I share my own experience. So I started PhD 2011, 2012 I started, and 2015 I graduated, so 3 years. So I got PhD from KU University. KU University requirement is also 2 publications, minimum scope. And what I started, I did my first publication in 2013. It means when I was the 2nd year PhD student. It is better that we don't wait until the end. Because I have seen that many students, because they couldn't publish, they couldn't defend on time, and they couldn't finish their study on time. So it is better that, after first year, from the 2nd year, we start to do some research. I don't agree with doing research without any, enough academic knowledge. Then that research also will be very low quality. But a PhD student, PhD scholar that already passed enough courses, who is in the 2nd year, he has enough knowledge and he can start the research and publish it. And actually, this book is my PhD dissertation. This book is my PhD dissertation. So, when I was PhD student, I had 6 paper publication, and this 6 paper, when I graduated, plus 3 other papers, it became this book. So, finally, it's published. So my suggestion is that consider the timing, and from the 2nd year, started to wrap up your research and submit to a journal. Maybe it be rejected initially, but then you have time and you have chance to revise it and submit to other journals. Okay, so is there any other question?
I think we have enough, and we are running out of our energy. So we should have some chance for you to stay in touch with Professor Farha from the 2nd session. We will also continue. So now, welcome back to Mr. Farha. Stay excused.
Thank you very much. So in the morning session, sessions in the morning, we discussed what factors we consider for selection of the journal, what after that, what points you need to pay attention for writing the paper, selection of the title, introduction, section conclusion, policy conclusion, and so on. But as I mentioned, most important thing is the uniqueness of the research that make it attractive, publishable in the journal, and so on. So Today in this session, I'm going to present result of one of my recent research, which is under peer review. It hasn't published, it hasn't accepted yet. It's under peer review. So this research is a project that is coming from a project that I have done for Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. It's called ERIA. And it was on Nexus study. Nexus. So when you want to look at if you are looking for a topic, interesting topic, Nexus studies are most recently very attractive. What does Nexus mean? Nexus. Nexus. So in the past, majority of the research in social science, in humanities, was one-sided. It means in assessing impact of one factor on another factor. For example, if monetary policy, if amount of money increase, what is the impact of it on inflation? Or if we use more fossil fuel, what is the impact of it on environment? If we use more energy, what is the impact of it, for example, on economic growth? It means assessing the impact of one factor on another factor. Not only in economics, but also in different fields, different disciplines of social science and humanities. Majority of the studies were just one-sided. However, reality, real world, is not one-sided. It means impact of one thing is affecting different factors. So it means multi-faced issue, or a nexus study. Nexus study means this. It means that assessing impact of one factor on different factors. This means nexus study or nexus analysis. So in this research, we assess the impact of energy, or in another word, assessing the impact of fossil fuel consumption on environment, at the same time on health and on economy. So it means we are considering different aspects, and it is multi-faced analysis. So yes, so this is the structure and the outline that provided here is exactly the structure of a paper. So this is also important when we want to prepare a presentation files, that the presentation files need to be similar to the structure of our paper, our research. Then audience, readers or audience of our presentation, they can follow the whole issue very clearly. So first, the introduction. In 2015, globally, both consumer and producer of fossil fuels received more than $420 billion subsidies. Fossil fuels like oil, like coal, like natural gas, both consumers and producers, they receive this much subsidy. Another type of subsidy that which is receiving in this sector fossil fuel is that many of the fossil fuel projects are not taxed efficiently. So this is also another type of support or another type of subsidy that they receive. According to a study by OECD, fossil fuel projects are benefiting from almost 800 different policies globally. So this means that this makes the competition between fossil fuels and renewable, such as solar, such as wind and so on, this makes this competition unfair, because one part is receiving lots of subsidy, another part is not receiving so much. So this eventually is unpaid cost to the environment and has cost on the human health and damage it. And then ultimately it needs to be paid again, because initially, you as a government, you are paying lots of subsidies to fossil fuels that make these fossil fuels more economical, more feasible. And then the consumers are using more fossil fuels, they are emitting lots of pollution in different countries, including in Thailand also emission, environmental pollution is also a serious matter. Then it has lots of health impact. So then governments need to pay again for the health expenditure. So in the introduction, it is clear that what is the motivation of doing this research? The motivation is clear, but still the objective is not clear here. So later on, we should explain the objective. In order to highlight the importance of it. So in introduction, it is very important to highlight the importance of doing this research. So it means we as a author, when we submit a paper to a journal, it seems that we want to sell our product. So when you want to sell your product, or when you want to do marketing on your product, you need to explain a lot. And this is very good research. It is very important topic. So talking about the importance of doing this research is an important element of introduction. So again, in the introduction, we see that pollution is a silent killer. As we see here, globally, every year, over 7 million people are dying due to exposure from both outdoor and household air pollution. And unfortunately, the largest number is in Southeast Asia, is in this region, ASEAN member countries. Every year, over 2 million people in Southeast Asian region are dying due to exposure to both indoor and outdoor air pollutions. Okay, next. Again, we are talking about importance of doing this topic. This topic is energy, economics, and health analysis. So because of that, among our authors, we have a medical doctor. Medical doctor who is my brother. So he's a medical doctor and he is an oncologist, radiation. So what are again, talking about the health impact of it, because readers will read the paper and will see that what is the impact of pollution on health. We need to highlight it, not so much deeply, because this is not a medical paper, this is more an economics paper, but we need to explain about it briefly. As we see here, burning fossil fuels not only emit carbon dioxide, but also sulfur dioxide, SO2, nitrous oxide, that all of them are harmful for the environment and for the public health. It is also releases particulate materials. I think you heard about PM2.5, particulate materials. And particulate materials are not only 2.5, there are different range, but 2.5 is the most famous one. In addition to that, ozone, sulfate, and other type of particulate matters are released in the air, as are toxic substances such as formaldehyde and benzene. And the sizes of these particulate materials are different. Children and elderly people are more suffering from these, and there are different kinds of disease according to the literature, such as asthma, pneumonia, bronchitis, upper respiratory, eye irritation, heart attack, heart disease, neurological deficits, cancer, immune system problems, and all. So it means whenever in the introduction or in throughout of the paper, whenever I'm mentioning a fact, the fact here is that pollution or particulate material has impact on this disease. You need to put a reference. You need to put a citation. Because reader will say, no, from my point of view, it doesn't have any impact. What is your reason? You don't need to explain the reason, but you just mention the citation. For example, in parentheses, this author 2000 or this author 2015, they found out. And that is enough for this kind of paper. So it means it needs to be reference or cite. The second impact of air pollution on health is mentioned here, that based on the 2017 Health Effect Institute statement, air pollution was responsible for 4.2 million premature deaths worldwide, and was ranked as ranked 5 among all human health risk factors. So, globally, air pollution provokes 25% of death caused by lung cancer, 14% of death caused by acute respiratory tract infection, 16% of death caused by stroke, and so on. So, moreover, it is associated with adverse birth outcome. Okay, so it became clear that air pollution has huge health impact. So it means I talked about importance of doing this research. But in this research, I am focusing on one infection, one disease, which is lung cancer. I don't want to talk about all type of disease. So it needs to be explained, because referees will ask, why lung cancer? I need to talk about the importance of lung cancer and the negative impact of pollution on lung cancer. Currently, again, according to data, you see wherever I provide a fact, it needs reference, it needs citation. Currently, lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer death in male, and the second leading cause in female. In females, number 1 is breast cancer, and number 2 is lung cancer. Although the main risk factor, according to the literature, according to the medicine literature, the main risk factor of lung cancer is smoking, but the second risk factor is pollution, and the pollution is mainly coming from fossil fuels. Several studies found out that cancerous cells are raised from the existing pulmonary stem cell in response to air pollution-induced epithelial damage. So this is explaining the reason. So it needs to be provided. While many others believe that particulate material or PMs, such as PM2.5, are the main carcinogenic factor to damage the cells. Okay. So up to here, I talked about the importance of doing this research, the health impact of fossil fuels, the health impact of pollution, which are mainly coming from fossil fuels. Okay, next, this research is focusing on ASEAN, Southeast Asian countries. I need to explain why ASEAN selected. Previous slide, I explained why lung cancer selected. Because if instead of lung cancer, I focus on, for example, asthma, readers or referee will ask, asthma is not very important. It doesn't have so much economic impact. Why you select asthma? Why you didn't look at, for example, lung cancer? Here I had a reason. Because number 1, the reason is coming from currently lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer death in males, and number 2 among females. So this is the reason. Next, in order to explain about the importance of doing this research and about the reason for selection of ASEAN, we need to provide some facts. That, as we see here in ASEAN, majority of the energy basket is dominated by fossil fuels. We see coal, water is coal, then oil, natural gas. And share of hydro power and renewable energy or clean energy is much smaller when compared to fossil fuels. And this was the first one, was the energy supply, this is the energy demand, and also this is showing the primary energy that shows the different sizes of each of these countries in ASEAN as for the consumption. Okay, now let's go a little bit further, and in order to find out that what are the air pollution and the health impact of it in ASEAN region. So as we see here, so there is, when we in the environmental economics, there is a curve, we call it Kuznets curve. Kuznets curve. What does Kuznets curve mean? So Kuznets curve here is the theoretical part. Because as I have mentioned, we need to provide some theoretical analysis. According to the Kuznets curve, there is a curve that when countries are growing and when the GDP per capita is increasing, pollution per capita or emission per capita is increasing. When the countries reach some sort of development, then they pay more attention to environmental factors and they reduce. After that, GDP per capita is increasing, but pollution is also reducing because people are paying more attention to the environment. So we call this Kuznets curve. For example, you see that in Scandinavian countries, GDP per capita is among the highest in the world, but pollution is also very low because gradually they reach to some sort of development that we care more about environment, about earth, and so on. So when we are looking at ASEAN countries, as we see here, they are moving on this on this curve that GDP per capita is increasing, but emission is also increasing. But this is harmful. And this shows the study in Southeast Asia. Age and standardized disability adjusted life year rate by per 100,000 individuals of cancer. As we see, the highest is respiratory disease cancers. So it means because of lung cancers and other respiratory disease, so many people who got these, patients who are suffering from this kind of disease, they are losing their lives. And we are losing this labor force in this region. So which has a huge economic impact. Not only the medical costs that governments need to provide, but also a huge economic cost, which is mainly coming from the labor loss. Because we are losing labor, or labor is reducing, the productivity of the labor is reducing because of these disabilities. So this is the second economic cost which is neglected. And again here, as we see, this is the gender comparison of cancers, different cancers in ASEAN. As we see here, lung cancer is major in males, and breast is number one among females. And when we see for the whole Southeast Asia, the estimated age standardized, or DALI, which is disability adjusted life year of lung cancer, it was 465 in 100,000 individuals, and the highest is, as we see here, in Indonesia, then Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Myanmar, Malaysia, Singapore, Cambodia, Laos, Timor, and Brunei. So as we see here, so for Thailand, it is also serious. So this shows importance of doing this research. So it means when we want to do a research, we need to select important topics. Then it has impact for that journal, not only for the journal, because you see, objective is not journal publication. Objective is to do a research that has social impact, to solve something, to provide some policy recommendation that be useful for the society. So up to now, I talked about the motivation behind doing this research. I talked about the importance of doing this research, but what are the research questions? You see, the same style that I provided here in this presentation file, same style need to be pay attention, need to be noted in writing the paper. These are the three questions that we aim to answer in this research. By considering different level of development, GDP per capita, and healthcare expenditure in ASEAN member countries, what is the impact of air pollution on lung cancer in this region? Is there any significant significant association between renewable energy consumption and number of lung cancer. It means if we use more renewable energy and if we make our energy consumption basket greener, does it mean that number of lung cancers will reduce? What are the economic impacts of renewable energy development on us and on economies? So these are the three questions that shows the importance of doing this research, and we aim to answer to them. Okay, so next session is the empirical part. We look at the variables, different variables. First of all, the dependent variable here is cancer or age standardized lung cancer prevalence. Explanatory variables are CO2 emission, metric ton per capita, nitrous oxide emission, 1,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent per capita, particulate material, and PM2.5 air pollution, and next, renewable energy consumption as a percentage of total final energy consumption, and we excluded traditional biomass. Traditional biomass in many Southeast Asian countries like Cambodia, like Myanmar. So in home, indoor, they are still using biomass. For example, burning wood or burning residuals, animal residuals, in order to, for cooking. So that is also harmful. And a significant part of indoor pollution is coming from biomass, traditional biomass. So we excluded traditional biomass here. And health expenditure per capita and GDP per capita. So these are the variables. As I have mentioned, before running the regressions, before selecting the proper model, we need to do lots of tests. For example, cross-sectional dependence test that we have done here, and the results is mentioned here, that the hypothesis is no cross-sectional dependence. And then based on that, because this is a panel data analysis, it's a time series panel data, and time series panel of all ASEAN member countries, and it is time series. So we have done different unit root tests. For example, we have done Fisher, augmented Dickey-Fuller. And another important thing is that doing robustness is really important. Robustness testing. It means when you are doing one test and the results show that there is no unit root, you need to do that by second time or the third time. The more the better. It means robustness test is confirming that the results that you find is acceptable. So presently many editors are focusing on robustness. It means just reaching to a result using one method is not sufficient. At least by two different methods, you need to find out that the result is semi. This means robustness. So here, for example, for the stationary, we have done three tests. Two of them are using as a robustness, and it is for reconfirmation of the results. And then, because of presence of unit root, we have done co-integration tests. Again, we have done two co-integration tests. No need to, it's not enough to do one test. Minimum two tests. For example, here I have done cow test and then Pedroni as the second. And then results show that there exists co-integration. So it means we need to look for an error correction model. So you see, all these tests need to come one after each other. Otherwise, it is not sufficient. And just running a regression is not enough. And this is the results. This is the result, empirical results that shows that we have done impulse response analysis, and the impulse response analysis shows that what is the response of cancer which is the dependent variable of this research, two different impulses. It means if we give impulse or if we give shock to each of the explanatory variables, which are CO2, NOx, PM2.5, GDP per capita, health expenditure, what is the response of cancer? As we see here, this is the accumulated response. So as we see here, cancer shows significant and constantly increasing response to CO2. NOx is also same. PM2.5 is also same. And interestingly, deployment of renewable energy is reducing number of cancers because of the contribution. So from the results, so previous one was showing the dynamic of the relationship. What we also need to know the number, that what is the contribution of each of these factors on the dependent variable. As we see here, the contribution or share of CO2 and NOx is tiny. Less than 1% of the variance of cancer is explained by CO2 and NOx. And the major share is by PM2.5, as it is clear here. So this shows the negative impact of particulate material on health, especially on cancer. On the other hand, as we see here, renewable energy has a significant share on reducing, because it is clear development of renewable energy will assist. But up to now was one-sided analysis. It means the impact of pollution on health. But as I have mentioned, this is a nexus study. As I have mentioned, this is a nexus study. And in this nexus study, we are assessing the impact of pollution on the health and also on the economy. Impact of pollution on health and economy. As for the impact of pollution on economy, as we see here, the results that we found is that cancer, having increased in the number of cancers, have significant negative impact on GDP per capita. It is clear because of the negative impact of it on the labor supply, because it will reduce the productivity of the labor, it will shrink the labor force, so it will have significant. Unfortunately, we see that there is positive association between CO2 and GDP per capita. Why? It means when we are polluting the environment more, we have higher economic growth rate. Why it is happening? The reason is that many of Southeast Asian countries, many of ASEAN countries, thanks to access to cheap fossil fuel, they could experience a high economic growth rate. So a significant reason behind the economic development and growth in Southeast Asian countries was cheap fossil fuel. That result of it was more developed societies, higher GDP per capita, but at the same time, higher pollution. And on the other hand, as we see here, developing renewable energy, presently it has negative impact on GDP per capita. Why? Because in the beginning of my presentation, I mentioned that majority of the subsidies are going to fossil fuels. So renewable is more expensive because majority of subsidies are going there. So renewable is more expensive. Therefore, the electricity that presently we are generating from renewable is more costly. Therefore, higher energy prices, it means lower economic growth and lower GDP. So the reason that we find here is supporting our hypothesis that because of the discrimination which is existing for subsidy allocation, the competition is unfair. And a reason behind this pollution and this health impact is current, inefficient subsidy allocation, that majority of the subsidies are there. And let me conclude and provide the policy implication, because as I mentioned, it is very important that our research, although very clearly we showed coefficients was very clear and we could explain the reality by that, but we need to provide recommendation. As a result of huge consumption of fossil fuel, high level of emission in Southeast Asia, the incidence of respiratory system disease, such as lung cancer, in this region is high. Hence, governments need to spend a huge budget and allocate subsidies for the healthcare system and for their treatments. It means initially you are paying lots of subsidies, making fossil fuels cheap, people are using fossil fuel, pollution, lung cancer, then you as a government should pay subsidy again for hospitalizing, for labor loss and so on. What we suggest is that from beginning, allocate these subsidies to the greener sector. From beginning, allocate these subsidies to the renewable in order to avoid that labor loss. On the other hand, economies are suffering from productivity loss and labor force loss, especially in severe disease like lung cancer that's caused by pollution. Our results show that ambient 2.5 air pollution of fossil fuel is one of the major causes of lung cancer in the region. On the other hand, deployment of renewable energy can reduce emission of CO2, NOx, and PM2.5. And the policy recommendations. The Nexus empirical results show that accessing to cheap fossil fuel is one of the reasons behind the accelerated GDP per capita in Southeast Asia. However, this has a latent cost, which is a negative health impact, and a result of it, respiratory disease, such as lung cancer and labor loss. We believe governments need to switch and target the subsidies from fossil fuels to renewable and green resources. On the other hand, another policy recommendation is cost creation for fossil fuels, such as carbon taxation, especially in power generation sector. Another suggestion that we have is diversification of the financing channels. Diversification of the financing channels of renewable energy projects, because one of the reasons that renewable energy projects have difficulties for their development is difficulties for accessing to finance. For example, development of schemes such as credit guarantee or green credit guarantee schemes is what we propose. These policies will not only positively affect the quality of life, but will also help governments to save budget from economizing their healthcare expenditure, and will positively affect the soundness and quality of the labor. Thank you for your attention. Okay, so this was an example that clearly importance of doing this research is very clear for everyone. And the research questions were also clear, data that we provided, methodology, model, finally policy implications are also accepted. Okay, so if there is a question, I'm happy to answer. There is no question?
So any questions? I think that probably you may think that economics will be just the way of presentation, but when you look at the way that Professor Farhan, I also realize that, well, the organization is a matter, because by using the foundations of economics, it seems so complicated to put the outline. But when you think about the way of doing this in master degree of some like majors like public policy, that's what I heard. Like even undergraduate projects, but still some students have some problems. But to organize these things, how can we make sure that concrete things like you put in order can come like a very clear cut thing that we are putting into digest for undergraduate level?
Thank you very much, Professor Nissim. So, let me share my own experience again. The first conference, international conference that I participated when I was a student, PhD student, and I had my first paper and submitted to a conference in Australia. I presented it. So it was I was nervous at that time because it was my first presentation. And beginning presentation was nervous and stressful. But it is very good to present, very good. And it's no problem if you have a stress. Because if you don't have a stress, then it's a problem if there is no stress. So if we present, we receive comments, this is the best way for revising our work. Usually at our university, we have seminar. For example, I have 2 seminar courses. I think you also have seminar courses. That undergraduate students and graduate students in each semester select one topic. And throughout the semester, each student presents 2 or 3 times. And each time, I give comments. Do this, do that, this is wrong. And other students also comment. First of all, in the first presentation, majority of the students have a stress, but in the second presentation they are not nervous and so on. The final presentation is perfect and the quality of the work improves. For example, the paper that I showed you, World Economy that published and some other SSCI journals, those students that I published with them are students of that seminars. It means first, they select a topic, they started to do a research, and they practice how to present. Presentation is also very important. Many times we do good research, but many people cannot speak very well or cannot present very well. So they cannot transfer the quality of their work. So you need to transfer, you need to convey impact of your work, quality of your work. This is also very important. So first of all, most important thing, doing good research. Unique topics, methodology and so on. Preparation of the presentation file is also very important. Very clear, you see, clear outline, sections, explanations. People understand them. And then receiving comments. So try to present your works as much as possible and don't worry, don't be nervous. And instead of suggestion from your professor's side, you propose to present your work. For example, organizing seminars for students so that students come and present their work and professors comment on their work. Then that will help you to, first of all, learning from others, and secondly, improving, revising your work, and thirdly, whenever I do a research or whenever I want to write a paper, first of all, when I finish the research, I prepare a good presentation file, then I present it at different conferences, 2, 3 different conferences, then I revise my research based on that conference, then I write a paper. And you see, when you have the structure, when you prepare a presentation file with good structure, then writing paper is very easy because the structure of that paper is same as the structure of the presentation file. And then simultaneously you can handle different research and you can write many papers. And for each of them you have your slides, your presentation files. So I think presently student conferences are also becoming very popular globally. So many conferences are designed and specialized only for students. That students with their supervisors participate there. And students should present, not the professor. So participating in such conferences, especially for graduate students, is also recommended, and it is very good to improve your work.
I think it's better to give the floor to students and participants. Don't be shy. I think sooner or later you have to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Please.
Because I'm undergrad student, I must if you're writing reports, you must collect data and information. If your teacher you like is what statistically collect data.
In what data? So collecting the data. So it depends on the type of research that you are doing, because the sources of data are different. For example, if you are doing a research on economics, so from central bank, from Ministry of Finance website, you can collect the data, or from international organizations such as IMF, such as World Bank, such as United Nations. It depends on the type of research. So there is no certain database that I recommend you collect your data there. It depends on the type of research. Yeah. But data collection is also an important part of the research. So did I answer your question, or you had another?
Need more? Okay, so he's aware of doing modeling. I think undergraduate students are confused. In case of, when you mention about theoretical modeling, which means come from somewhere, but for some students, they think that they should create their own model. Yeah, this is situation.
So the theoretical model, of course, it is difficult, and there is no such expectations from undergraduate students. But even undergraduate, you as undergraduate students, you are reading economic textbooks, so you are familiar with different theories, consumption theory, savings, income, and different theories are coming. Even if you are doing a research just as a part of requirement of your courses, not for publication. When you are writing a paper or a report or preparing your presentation file, if you, for example, you are doing a research as a part of requirement of Professor Isit's class, assessing impact of different factors that have impact on income per capita. If before bringing any variable, you explain it by economic theory from your textbook, that is very good, and it will be well accepted that this is the reason that I included, for example, consumption, I included saving, and so on from my textbook. Because now, if you are economics student, so I think you have macroeconomics, micro, and so on. So all these things are coming, came in your textbooks that you can refer to them. No need you write a theoretical model by yourself as a student. You don't have such expectation. But a researcher or a professor, yes, there is some expectation.
Somehow I ask my student to write a paper. They just come with general formula. But my question is, how can we support evidence? Like when you put the literature reviews, like for example, it has to be same tone or conflicts. And how can you make this kind of sentence more interesting in your paper to touch the feeling of the peer review?
So, thank you very much. So for the undergraduate students, as I mentioned, you shouldn't have expectations of developing the paper like this level, theoretical, empirical, econometrics, and so on. however, what I expect from an undergraduate student or from my undergraduate student is that follow an academic way of doing research. So following academic way of doing research. What does it mean? It means it has same style, introduction and literature. So the type of research that undergraduate student can do, it could be a review of the literature. Review of the literature is also a research method. It means that, for example, from a specific topic, that in order to answer to the question, you just review the literature. You are not adding something to the literature. You, as an undergraduate student, you want to answer to a question, and you read 20 or 30 related papers and summarize those. So this is a review. The literature review is also a methodology of doing research, which is using in different disciplines, including in social science and humanities. So this is also a way that you can follow for your coursework and also for writing a paper. If you are not so much interested to do econometrics or modeling.
We keep our energy for another section, maybe more closer, respond. So for the people who believe it's okay, for someone who stay here, I think that you have another chance to explain and ask, close to the lesson. I think it's time to take a break, and we come back.
with Dr. Who is your advisor? Oh, you finished already? So this yes or no? Just Chinese economy. Your term paper, what you plan to do? I was thinking about healthcare system in China. Because coronavirus is one of the factors that we have to support the healthcare system. We can change to a big and small city or coastal area, south or east, depends on the needs. Or we can do something like a big city have big growth rate. If everything is new, then we can do that. That's why the book that I said is the right. It's a enrichment program. And we will have compare ourselves before and after case study of SARS begins to do. And then you can remember that coronavirus is in this stage, but SARS take 10 years, maybe coronavirus, which is some prediction that we can claim about this maybe bigger or less when and how. So I don't have time to talk, but if people come here, I get extra. So don't be shy, please ask. Otherwise, you will waste your time. Anything that you plan to write about? Ask anything else. You finish 408 or 409? Yeah. 407? You still have 408 and 409? What do you plan to write about? Because the most difficult part for you to work is which is organized. And 409, that is another step and you can analyze it. 408 is rather short and simple. You mean the data? Or you mean the story? The story is the principle. First, try to find the question. What's the problem with this? What is the problem?
need to be make it more interactive. So if, for example, I know about the case of your study, or if you have a paper, I can see it and I can give comments. So I think that will be useful. So because you can get some comments in order to improve your course.
The faculty hire Professor Farhan to give you advice. So this is the thing that you can bring in the story to as well, and ask. And even you have the paper. Yanni, you also have the oh yes.
Yeah.
AED, and you also will be eligible to
This is the abstract.
Okay.
Yes, yes. If you send by email to me, if you send tonight, I can also give some.
Can you open on that?
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so if you have your papers ready, or if you wrote a report, or if you have any idea about research, please share with me, and I'm happy to give comments on your research or on the idea that you have. Because ultimately we ought to publish, and this is the goal. So it is better to share. Yeah.
So one lady, she also wants to look at the impact of the coronavirus, for example, and how can she combine with the thing that maybe less or more economics.
So coronavirus, that is also very interesting, and the important thing is data. Are you from Thailand? China. So if Chinese data, I think it is available. But majority of Chinese data are in Chinese language. So if you can search, you find some. Presently there is no time series data because it just happened. But cross-sectional data, cross-sectional. I have seen that about coronavirus. I have seen that presently some research has been done in China and published in very good journals, in Nature and some other top scientific journals. And many of them didn't do any specific analytical works. But because now everyone is interested to know about coronavirus more, so journals accept it faster. But I'm sure that this is not just your idea, not just my idea. Many people are now thinking about coronavirus and are started to do a research because this is an interesting topic. If you have some specific data, if you can search and find cross-sectional coronavirus data from different provinces of China, and for example, age of people, and median of age, genders, and different variables, the more variables you can get, the more sophisticated research we can do. And then it is possible to, based on a data, because if I give you a topic, maybe you cannot find that data. Sometimes for these specific cases, we can design a research and we can make the research question based on the availability of the data. For example, you will do your best to collect the best data, then you will tell me or you will tell your professor that this data is available. Then based on that you can, we can prepare the research question. So first thing is to collect the data. cross-sectional data of coronavirus in different provinces of China. But not just how many people infected. So because that is the dependent variable, or age standardized of infection. This is a dependent variable. Explanatory variable. Other variables that you can collect in that coronavirus data. And then sharing it with me or with professor and with the research. Because health economics is also very important, and most recently I'm focusing on it. This is one of the health papers, and I also have some other new health papers. For example, I look at the neurological disorders in Japan, because Japanese population is aging, becoming old. And in the aging societies, there are different disease is happening more, such as neurological disorders, Alzheimer, and stroke, brain stroke, and these things are happening more. We assess the impact of neurological disorders on GDP, regional GDP of different Japanese provinces. And what is the policy recommendation that we can have in order to reduce the burden? This is also possible that we can do, but this is an epidemic disease. It is different from that. But it is possible to do a health economics analysis. That will be interesting. Because for this type of research, for example, for that neurological research that I have done, although it hasn't published yet, but it is under review, what I found out is that majority of these papers are written by doctors, medical doctors. Medical doctors, they don't have economics or financial knowledge. So the study that they do is more accounting. For example, for this neurological disorder, I can show the paper also, I can show the presentation. For the neurological disorder, the question that I had was that what are the economic costs of neurological disorders? I reviewed the literature and I found out that many medical doctors publish good papers in top journals, Nature, Science, and so on. But for the cost, they just calculated hospital costs or medicine costs. But when we are talking about cost of disease, the most important cost is economic cost, which is labor loss. You see the people, 70,000 people who are infected in China, one cost, infected by coronavirus, one cost is hospital, cost of taking care. But most important cost is cost, opportunity cost, opportunity. It means they cannot work. So this is the cost which is invisible. And it is very important. So if we want to do an economic analysis, we should calculate the opportunity cost of the person who is infected and cannot work, and the family who is taking care of him or her and cannot work. Then it will be very unique. And I'm sure presently for coronavirus also, because these papers are mainly written by medical doctors, so because they don't have the economic knowledge, so they don't consider opportunity cost. If you want to do something else and you consider this, it will be very unique. Yeah.
I have health-related issue to ask. So right now, I'm working on language use and mental problems, and I'm interested in how people with bipolar or with unipolar have an effect on their language use. So, but I think. So you hear me so you heard me, right?
If you kindly repeat again, please.
Okay, so right now I changed my research interest into the field of health and language, and I'm interested in how the cognitive functions or the language use of some people, like people with bipolar or unipolar patients, how their language is affected by such illness. And I think, well, it's not about writing the paper, but it's about writing a research proposal to get a grant. So I think it would be nice if I can add some kind of economic aspect into my research proposal. So in terms of economic point of view, apart from the opportunity cost, what else do you think I should pay attention to for this kind of illness in
What type
types
of
of
illness?
bipolar or depressive patients, people with mental problems. Yes.
Thank you very much. So, if you want to enrich your proposal, if I be in a position of assessor of a proposal, first of all, the point that I consider is that if you would collect the data using a survey by yourself, sample size is very important, size of sample, and significance of the research is based on the size of sample, which is very important. For example, although the size of sample, there is no specific model for calculating that what is the adequate sample size. And if you research in this area, if you search in the literature, some people propose a model that, for example, 50, 60, 70, but not less than 50 for the sample. As for the cost for bipolar, although I haven't studied in this field, but what come to my mind is that there are, if I can show my presentation file, I have some related research. There are 2, 3 or 4 different categories of costs associated. One cost is the operational cost of hospitals, that a part of this cost is coming, hospital or medicine. A part of this cost is coming from the public sector, government, using subsidies, or for example, public hospitals are cheap or free, anyway it is government budget, and it has a burden on the government. A part of it is coming from the, it is operational, medical, hospital, but it is private, because the family of the person, they need to pay for the medicine and so on. So this is the first part. Second part, which is also the public cost, it is research and development costs. So government is paying some budget to this university, to that university, for the research on this field. So this is also a cost, but it has more long-term horizon. Third cost is the labor loss of the person, which is a type of opportunity cost. Labor loss, he is a person, he cannot work enough, so it means that although society is paying for him, but he cannot have that much contribution. And fourth cost is the labor loss or opportunity cost of the family who are taking care of them. So these are the 4 different groups of costs which are associated with any kind of disease, but disease or disorder. But for each of them, the opportunity cost, the medical cost are different in different stages. For example, again, let me bring an example from the point that I have mentioned, neurological disorder. A person who has a stroke, or who has Alzheimer, if he is in the first stage, so the family no need to take care of it so much. But if it is in the last stage, so whether hiring a nurse or family, children, sister, brother, they need to spend more time on it. So this is also a point that need to be considered, whether that disease or disorder is in the which stage, and whether the person is independent or he is depending on others. So that will make the cost vary. But it is very good that you bring some economic factors. Frankly speaking, if we want to have a higher chance for our proposals to be accepted, for grants, or our papers to be published, making research multidisciplinary is very interesting. You see, presently, I'm shifting from economics to more economics and other fields. For example, economy, science, economy, medicine, economy, and for example, other fields of social science and so on. Because in each of these disciplines, they are getting enriched. There are lots of research in each of these fields. But a person who is medical doctor, he doesn't know economics. Or I don't know medicine. But by doing a joint research, the output will be more interesting for the audience. Audience will be government to give you grant or journal to accept your paper. So making it more multidisciplinary by bringing economics inside will make it more interesting. So this is the thing. So public policy issues here. Interested to do a review of the literature, and at the same time, do you have any interest on collecting some data, analyzing it? So what kind of data are you And I think the data is also available for the case of Thailand, I don't know, but if you can access to data that such kind of platforms like Airbnb or others, how many percent of the tourists are using these services, and how much, then assessing the impact of it on incoming tourists. Because such kind of platforms or peer-to-peer accommodations are not targeting all different sectors of tourists. A person who is traveling luxury, 5-star, 4-star, he never look for example, Airbnb. But more commercial and younger generation, budget travelers, they are targeted. So if you have, my suggestion is that if you have some sectoral analysis, it could be interesting for government as well as for the hotels, because hotels are worried about this matter, that they have concern that this will negatively affect their business. But result of your research can show that, for example, for those hotels which are more than 3 stars, it doesn't have any impact. But at the same time, it can bring more tourists to the country, and it will make the business more competitive from business. So if you can get some sector-wise data and do some sector-wise analysis, I think it will be very interesting. That what is the impact of peer-to-peer accommodation on incoming tourists, or the revenue from the tourism industry in Thailand or in China. That is interesting. So, is there any other question? So you mentioned that you are doing a research. Shall I hear more from your experience?
Because I'm finding I want to find some direction about international trade. So can you give me some direction about international trade, or about spillover technologies spillover?
Okay. You are you master student?
No.
Undergrad? Trade. You are interested in trade? Yeah. So are you from China?
Yes.
So you are interested in trade, because trade is it's a word of study. It's very general, trade. So it is better, first of all, to narrow down your area, narrow down. For example, one point which is hot, interesting, is BRI, Belt and Road Initiative of China. If you can assess the impact of China BRI policy on Chinese manufacturers' export to ASEAN member countries, that would be interesting. Because whenever we want to select a topic, it is very important that we see what is the mainstream of topics. Then we look for a topic to be related to that. Because BRI is very interesting. Or Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, these are interesting. So when we want to apply for grants, or when we want to, for example, if you are in China, and you use the keyword of Belt and Road Initiative, your chance of being accepted for your application will be increased. Because Chinese government is so much interested in BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. So assessing the impact of BRI on export of Chinese manufacturers to Southeast Asia, you can consider the export as a whole, or you can look at some specific products. For example, high-tech products, high-technology products, or knowledge-based products, high-tech or for example, automotive industry. What is the impact of it on that sector's growth? Then it will be interesting. So, is there any other question? You are also from China. So, what is your interest? In FDI and international trade. Yes. So FDI, again, I am highlighting BRI. So ASEAN, in this region, lots of work has been done. But one region which is interesting and not many studies have been done, but it is also among the targets of Chinese government, is Central Asia. Central Asia. So Central Asian countries consist of 9 countries plus China. Plus China, it means 10 countries. So some parts of China, Urumqi, Xinjiang, so that is part of Central Asia. Besides that, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Mongolia. So these are 10 countries that consist Central Asia. It's called CAREC, Central Asian Regional Economic Cooperation. So Chinese government is paying more attention to this region and it's bringing flow of capital together. So one sector that Chinese companies and Chinese government is interested in Central Asia is energy sector, energy. For example, investment in hydropower project, investment in gas-based coal power plants. So you can assess the impact of Chinese FDI in line with Belt and Road Initiative on economic growth of Central Asian countries or CAREC member countries. That is very interesting and new topic. Is it good? Okay, is there any other question? So you are master or professor? You are a researcher? Are you a student or researcher? A student. So if there is no more questions, so then shall we wrap up, finish? Or we should continue? We can continue. Okay, so if there is no more question, we can finish for today. But for tomorrow, if you are joining, if like this one, you have something, then we can discuss about it. That will be interesting. And I'm happy to comment on your work as well. Okay? Thank you very much for joining.